Stewart Fulton here in Japan, sending you the best news, reviews, previews, interviews, all the views from the land of the rising sun, pro wrestling, pro grappling, kickboxing, mixed martial arts, and especially a focus on those who are responsible for releasing the Kraken. This is Kraken Chronicles. Stewart Fulton here in Japan, opening up the book of Chronicles at a very auspicious chapter today with a guest and friend who is a former fighter, wrestler, doorman turned writer, commentator, actor, and stunt specialist. Among the extensive movie list on his resume, his work includes film titles such as Deadpool 2, Riverdale, and The Predator. Paul Lazenby, welcome to Kraken Chronicles.
Thank you very much, my friend. I'm honored to be on.
Now, we're personally connected through Japan and Pancrase, so let's talk about that first. You were here a few years before me, and in March 1997, you got in the ring with Masakatsu Funaki at Pancrase 40. Tell us about that whole time leading up to coming to Japan, your experience in Japan and the Pancrase dojo.
Well, I got into Pancrase in the most bizarre fashion you could imagine that could never happen in the modern era. I never wanted to be an actual fighter. I never wrestled as a child. I never did a boxing match or a kickboxing match or martial arts or anything. My only fights have been street fights, as a bouncer. But I always wanted to see Japan. I started as a professional wrestler in 1991, and I came up with guys like Lance Storm and Chris Jericho and Dr. Luther and the late, great Rick Wagner, a.k.a. Big Titan. And those guys were all very early in their careers. They were regularly going to Japan. And I was fascinated with the country, but I had a few near misses and never quite managed to get booked on a tour that didn't fall through before I left. So at a professional wrestling show in 1996, I ran into a lady named Phyllis B, who was managing a number of mixed martial arts fighters, including Dan Severn. And I introduced myself and I said, are you booking wrestlers for any work at all? And she said, no, but I'm booking real fighters. And she went on to tell me that the Shamrock Brothers had just left Pancrase and they were largely responsible for booking the foreign talent into Japan. So that job had fallen to her. And she asked if I wanted to apply. So they'd never taken a Canadian before. Canadian had never fought in Pancrase. This is, like I said, late 96. So I was kind of chuckling to myself because I'm thinking there's no way they're going to take me. But I'm going to apply anyway because I was a huge fan. I had been, thanks to my friend Dr. Luther, who introduced me to the Pancrase via the tapes he was bringing back from Japan. I had become a huge fan of Pancrase. I watched all my tape of death. I knew all the names and faces and the famous fights. So I just filled up the application form they sent me with lies, just pure BS, like just fraudulent martial arts credentials and fraudulent experience and tournament wins of tournaments that didn't exist. And I sent it off laughing because I was thinking, there's no way they're going to check up on this and they're going to see that there's a million other Canadian guys more qualified than me to fight there, and I'm never going to fight there. And I forgot all about it. And then a month later, Phyllis called me up and I picked up the phone and she said, Moshi Moshi, which, as you know, Stuart, that's how you answer the phone in Japan. And Dr. Luther had told me the same thing. So it took me a second to realize what she was saying. And I said, "Can you repeat that again?" She said, Moshi Moshi. I said, "Are you saying what I think?" And she said, "Yeah, you're going to Japan next month and you're going to fight in Pancrase." And that was my entry. My first opponent was slated to be Ryushi Yanagazawa. We called him Aji, who I had been down on the form as my favorite fighter. He and Funaki were the two names I put down as my two favorite guys. He was about my size. Like I was about 100 kilos, maybe a little more at the time. And he was roughly the same size. Ranked number 3 in the world. He had recently beaten Oleg Taktarov, the legendary UFC champion. He had previously gone the distance with, I believe it was Vitaly Klitschko in a kickboxing match. So he was no slouch. And that was my introduction to any kind of competitive fighting, was flying to Japan, going to NK Hall, which I believe holds roughly 10,000 people, and then fighting the number 3 ranked fighter in the world with no clue what I was doing.
That's a classic case of fake it till you make it. You believe you can do it. You think, yeah, I've got this. And you go and you actually do it and it happens.
Yeah, although To be honest, because information wasn't as easy to come by as it is now in the internet age, there were a lot of rumors about Pancrase with regards to whether the fights were legitimate. You know, there were groups like Rings and UWFI that were putting on what were basically professional wrestling matches, but they looked very real to the uneducated eye. They were presenting themselves as real fights. So there were a lot of rumors about whether or not Pancrase was legitimate fights. So the whole week that I was there before my fight, I was half expecting somebody to come up and give me the nudge and whisper in my ear about what was going to happen, and nobody did. Right down to the point where I was walking to the ring and still thinking, did they forget to tell me the finish of this match? Like, I don't want to be in there fighting for real if the other guy expects it. This is a worked fight. And it wasn't until I got in the ring and I looked down at the canvas and there were blood splatters everywhere. And then I thought, okay, that's the moment at which I knew I was fighting for real.
Yeah, you figure it out pretty quickly then. Yeah, that's one of the fascinating things about how mixed martial arts formed and grew here, you know, from the late 80s. One of the first ones I know of was shoot boxing, which is still going, you know, which is primarily a stand-up striking, but you can throw for points and you can do submissions, standing submissions, although, you know, it's using boxing gloves style. And then, you know, onto the pioneers, Pancrase, Shuto, and well, Pancrase still going strong 30 years later. You know, last year we celebrated our 30th anniversary, and those old original rule sets that came through pro wrestling with catch wrestling and some jiu-jitsu in there as well. It really is fascinating how that time sparked off, you know, what would become Pride later, and K1 was huge, and now, you know, it's massive all over the world. It's for guys like us, it's really fascinating to see that evolution of the sport.
Yeah, and being a professional wrestler first, it always kind of makes me smile when I hear mixed martial arts fans look down their nose at pro wrestling, because I just explained, MMA basically evolved out of professional wrestling. You know, it was catch wrestling. Professional wrestling was catch wrestling and legitimate fights for a while. Then it evolved into being what we call worked fights or faked fights. And Pancrase was kind of an aggressive move to steer it back toward being real. They used essentially a pro wrestling skills moveset. I mean, in fact, when I got in the ring, the first time I got in a Pancrase ring, it was a professional wrestling ring. It was 3 ropes instead of 4 or 5, and it was sprung like a wrestling ring. You have the rope escapes, you got the open hands to the head and the punches to the body. It was all pro wrestling rules, but real fights. And it was kind of the bridge between professional wrestling as we know it, with the choreographed fights, and what we now know as mixed martial arts. So Pancrase was and is a tremendously important building block in modern MMA.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, those old shoot style fights and the way the rules evolved, you know, even Pancrase itself has evolved right through to you know, modern day MMA rules. But really, really fascinating time, and I can see why you were so attracted to things out here, because the history is so rich and deep. And you know, if you're going to learn, you're going to learn pretty quick out here.
Oh yeah, I learned fast, because I lost to Aji 5 points to nothing. So in North American terms, that makes me a huge loser in the eyes of a lot of North Americans. But what I would learn very quickly, and one of the many things I love about Japan, is Japanese people don't think the same way as North Americans, and all they saw was a big dumb Canadian who got in there and threw himself at his opponent. Didn't matter that he was overmatched. That's my attitude, is if I'm going to die, then I may as well die fighting and see if I can leave a couple of bruises on the guy to remember me by. So I at least made Aji work for it. And when I got out of the ring, there was one person after another, including some of the fighters, Kazuo Takahashi, or Yoshiki Takahashi as he's gone by. He was one of them that went out of their way to come over and congratulate me on a fight where I thought I got destroyed. So having done that, I went home and thought, still, all right, you know, I still lost by a significant margin. I got to have my Japan experience. I was so poor, I didn't have a mouth guard or groin cup. So I was very happy that everything was intact in those departments too. And a week after I got home, the phone rang, and it was Phyllis, my agent, and she was losing her mind. And she said they They saw something in you, and they want you to come back and live at the Pancrase Dojo in Yokohama and train with them for a while. Now, this is a time when, and this is not an exaggeration, this is a time when fighters in Canada who competed in mixed martial arts were being arrested and put in jail. That's how vilified the sport was in Canada at the time. So I'm living in a country where that's happening, and I get an offer to, at their expense, go to Japan and live and train with the best fighters in the world. Like I was immediately in. Not realizing what a charnel house the Pancrase Dojo was, but I probably would have gone anyway. And it was a very, very, very steep learning curve. It involved a lot of pain, a lot of torture, being tested. You know, they wanted to see if their investment was a worthwhile one. There was one particular day where Minoru Suzuki tortured me, and I don't use that word lightly, for 30 minutes, and just to see if I would quit. But when I came back, I was slaughtering my training partners, the conditioning workouts, and just what technique I was able to pick up. And I went over there very stupid, so I was able to pick up only the basics. But what I learned and how I evolved as a fighter in a very short period of time, when I came home, I was a completely different fighter.
I'll bet you. Yeah, yeah. Now, on to the next connection between the two of us. I did a little bit of bouncing in Edinburgh before I came out to Japan, but you have way more experience, and you've written 2 books on bouncing, When We Were Bouncers 1 and 2, which I have read and proudly own. Very entertaining collections of real life short stories about your days working as security and all the characters and situations surrounding that. There are probably so many, but can you give us one example that stands out in your mind when you were forced to either release the Kraken yourself or contain it in a violent confrontation?
Well, I actually, there's one story I have in mind, but the majority of the books actually has nothing to do with me. I'm in them. I've got my own chapter, but I've deliberately gone out of my way to have a little hook for this series, because I always used to wonder why there was never a bouncing themed TV show or book series or movie or anything aside from Roadhouse that people really connected with, that really managed to stick. And then I realized what it was is that most people have a negative association with bouncers in their head. You know, if they think bouncers, they think of a time that the guy wouldn't let them in the club because their shoes weren't right, or because he wanted money at the door, or he beat them up because of something they did in the club and threw them out. They don't like bouncers. But I'm lucky enough to have been an actor and a stuntman and a pro wrestler and a professional fighter and a competitive strength athlete. I've got a foot in all these worlds, and there are extraordinary people in all those professions that used to be bouncers. So I thought, that's my hook. I'm going to put famous people in the books that used to be bouncers. So you might not like bouncers, but if you're a professional wrestling fan, you might like Samoa Joe. And it's okay. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to get Joe's stories. And one of the Unleash the Kraken moments that really makes me smile is from Theo Rossi, the actor who played Juice on the Sons of Anarchy TV series, and a very successful actor. He's been in the Luke Cage series and Emily the Criminal, the movie, and I could spend a half an hour running down his resume. But Theo moved from the East Coast of North America, to the West Coast, from New York to Los Angeles. And the mindsets are very different. And he talked about what an adjustment period it was for him and his friends who had moved to LA to seek their fortune, not just for him and his friends, but also for the people who lived in LA. Because he said, we were like a bunch of animals. You know, New York people deal with things very directly. You know, if you disrespect us, we will beat you. And in LA, so he said this, you know, you'll go to a nightclub and you'll disrespect a guy in front of his girlfriend, and then you just bump chests until the bouncers come in and separate you. He said, we don't do things like that back home. So he and his friends were working at a club, and Theo was doing security and also got pulled into service as a host. And he was taking the initial drink order from a table of rather arrogant individuals. And this guy told him what his drink order was, and they said, hurry up, I'm going to time you. Hurry up, run along. And Theo said he stood there for a second with his tray in his hand, and he thought, okay. And then he turned around, he waffled the guy right in the side of the head with the tray, and all his friends descended on the table, and they beat the hell out of all the guys at the table and threw them out in the parking lot. And it was just, that was them making a statement that we do things the New York way here in Los Angeles, and it gave them an immediate reputation that these are not the guys to mess with, and their Unleash the Kraken threshold was far shorter than it is for Los Angeles bouncers. So they were pretty established on the scene after that.
Wow, yeah, I really think we could do a 2-3 hour podcast at least on this topic alone. So we might have to revisit this at some point in the future, Paul.
Well, I got plenty of stories for you, so I'm happy to do it anytime.
Excellent. Now, onto your movie work. You've actually worked on a movie called Kraken, Tentacles of the Deep back in 2006.
Yeah,
Could you tell us about that?
Well, it didn't win any Academy Awards. I'll put it like that. I'm always happy to be working. I got to do a fall off the side of a boat, which was a first for me at the time. I also learned how it is that people can sometimes drown 10 feet from shore because the lake that I was falling into was fed by a glacier. And when the water is that cold, I'd never experienced water that cold before, and it felt like somebody was reaching into my chest and squeezing my lungs with their hands. So I'm glad we had a safety diver on hand as well. But that one, I worked on that one with a longtime friend of mine, Alex Paunovic, who's a very successful actor now and former Canadian boxing champion. And he and I were both henchmen in the same group of criminals. And to this day, I don't know how he managed to put it on me, but he and Chris Jericho are friends because they're both from Winnipeg. And Alex was originally scripted to die at the hands of the Kraken by having the Kraken send one of his tentacles up his backside and out his mouth. And Alex vetoed that and had them rewrite it. And somehow he managed to talk to Jericho and put it on me and say that I got sodomized by a lake monster in that movie. And of course, Chris won't ever let it go from then on. So that movie represents my particular hatred of Alex Paunovic because I'm never going to live that down.
Well, if you ever play Poseidon in a movie with the ability to actually release the Kraken, then you're going to have to come on the show as a guest of honor, because it's a very, very, very possible thing, knowing the wide variety of movies and TV things that you do. You must have tons of stories in that field as well. Of all the movie work that you've done to date, which has been the most challenging when you had to really dig deep to get through it? Because stunt work's really cool for the viewer to watch, but we cannot forget just how damn dangerous it is.
Yeah, absolutely. One that comes to mind is the very beginning of my run. I had a 5-year run of being the stunt double for Steve Austin. He signed a contract to make a series of low budget movies here, just to learn about the film industry, and he was coming back at least once every 6-7 months, and so I just doubled him on all those movies. But the first one that I doubled him on, called A Stranger, I had to do something called an air ram. An air ram is basically a compressed air driven catapult. So you step on it and the arm goes up and it throws you. But you have to have your body oriented in a very specific way and your muscles tensed in a very specific way in order for it to throw you properly and to fly through the air properly. And if you don't, people have been crippled and even killed on those things. They're extremely powerful. The first time when I learned how to ride an air ram, I weighed 262 pounds. That was about 120 kilos. And air ram was easily throwing me 5 feet up and about 30 feet laterally. I'm not sure what that is in meters. I think in both systems, but it was throwing me across the room easily, and they didn't have it turned up all the way. That's how powerful they are. So in this case, we had a scene where Steve's character, his wife and his child are trapped in a burning car in the driveway of his home. And he gets out of his car and runs over and he tries to open the door, and then the car explodes and it throws him up and backward and onto the lawn of the adjacent house. So, of course, that's down to me. And on the day, or during rehearsals, rather, I'm going into a big high jump pad. And we did it a few times just to work out my flight pattern and everything, because I'm going backward and I have to ride it a certain way going backward. I have to have my friend Chad Bellamy triggering the air ram, so we have to be completely in sync. So we ran it a few times, and then during one of the attempts, I just lost my compass in the air. I completely lost my sense of where I was in the air and landed in the pads in a way that folded my head into my chest, and then my full body weight went back over top of me, and I heard my neck just go the same way as my arm make when I fought my Mike Funaki, and he cranked it. It just is zip. And for a moment, I was just laying there thinking, all right, wiggle the fingers and toes and make sure that I'm not paralyzed. Thankfully, I wasn't, but that was really scary. It did. My neck was really messed up. That was, potential paralysis. And then a day later, I got a call from the stunt coordinator, and he said there was a miscalculation when we figured out how we're going to shoot this. We were just at the location where we're shooting it. We're actually seeing a lot more of the lawn you're landing on than we realized. We can't give you any pads. Can you still do it? So I've gone from almost breaking my neck in the pads to now I'm going to take this to the lawn with an exploding car in front of me. And on the day it was raining. So it was like one thing after another going wrong. 3 times in a row, I was on the air ram and they were doing the countdown 3, 2, 1, and somebody had to put their hand up and go, stop, 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 stop. So it was like a comedy of errors. But actually managed to get it done, didn't get paralyzed. The shot looked great. Unfortunately, the editors screwed it up and you can't even see the gag in the movie, but I'm happy with it. And yeah, that's one time I really had to get my head right, on my body right. And it could have gone really, really, really bad. So that's one day that sticks out of my head for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's changed the underwear material, that for sure.
Yes.
Damn. Now the final connection between us is commentating. We had the pleasure of bringing you in for Pro Wrestling Noah's New Year's Day show 2023 at the Nippon Budokan, headlined by Shinsuke Nakamura and the Great Muta. We not only witnessed the Kraken being released, we got to talk about it on the live broadcast, which you can see in Wrestle Universe archives. And with Funaki on the card that day, it must have felt very special for you.
Extremely. Yeah. I can't thank you enough for making that happen. Cause I know we were talking about wanting to work together on a commentary gig for a while. And it was you that brought the idea up. And I've been making almost every year. I go back to Japan around New Year's because that's when they have Wrestle Kingdom and the big Noah show. And I've got a lot of friends who come in from all over the world for professional wrestling, and that's my chance to see them and see my Japanese friends. And yeah, it was a real, if you want to call it a bucket list thing, to do commentary on a big show in Japan. And I think I told you, like I am so over the moon. Obviously, the answer is yes, but I'm going to wait one request. That's I got to call Funaki's match because it was, I believe, 26 years after we fought in Nagoya, and just to be back in Japan at the Nippon Budokan, calling for Noah, like it's such a prestigious company, and just being on the mic with you and Mark Pickering, and being able to call the action as my friend and former adversary Funaki's in the ring. It was an extremely special moment for me. It's not one I'm going to forget.
It really is funny how things can come full circle like that sometimes in life. There's so many things like that. If you just keep going, keep doing your thing, these things pop up from time to time.
Oh yeah, like in my film career, it happens all the time. I mean, I am essentially a failed pro wrestler. I've already mentioned some of the names of the people that I came up with, and they just kept going and then became huge stars in wrestling, and I didn't. I veered off into MMA, and I was at best an okay professional wrestler. I don't think I ever would have become a big star, but that was my initial dream. I ended up in stunts and in acting. Well, in 2019, I made a WWE movie called The Main Event, and I'm in the ring with WWE stars. And I've stunt doubled John Cena, I've stunt doubled Bill Goldberg, and of course I had that run with Stone Cold. So it's again, it's just like my original dream dovetailing with the dream I ended up having, and like you said, it was just a matter of just I kept banging my head against the wall until the wall finally gave in, and I kind of failed into something equally awesome. I never made it as a pro wrestler, but I got to fight in Japan because I was pursuing wrestling. I got to be a stuntman and actor because I was pursuing wrestling. So you never know how things are going to work out. They might not work out the way you expect, but it might be something that's just as good or better.
For sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's beautiful. So, what are you working on right now?
Right now, I am back on the series Superman and Lois. I came in on season 3 as a character called Henry Miller, Atom Man, a neo-Nazi supervillain. He was actually the Superman is played by an actor named Tyler Hoechlin in that show, and I was the first costumed villain that version of Superman ever faced in season 1. So they brought him back in season 3, and the showrunners Brent Fletcher and Todd Helbing. I was only supposed to be there for the first episode. He fights me, he beats me, I'm out. and they made the game day decision to keep Henry Miller around for a while, which I really appreciate. So I stuck around for most of season 3. They rewrote the whole season to include a story arc with him. And just as that was wrapping up, they decided that they were going to unleash their own version of the Kraken in the Superman universe, which is a character named Doomsday. And Doomsday actually beat Superman to death back in 1992 in the comics, and it made huge mainstream news at the time. And he very quickly became the biggest Superman adversary outside of Lex Luthor. So they said, well, we're auditioning guys. They were keeping it a secret at the time. They said, we're bringing in Doomsday on the final episode of this season. Do you want to audition for it? And obviously I did. And I booked it. And so that storyline needs resolution. And we're back for season 4. So I'm back on the set. And unfortunately, I can't divulge too much information about it. But I'm very happy to be back. And I think the fans are going to be happy to see what we've got for them.
Oh, that's excellent. Where can we see that?
Here, it's in North America, it's on the CW network. I'm not sure about online access. I'm sure that you can get it in Japan, but just look for the series Superman and Lois, and I'm sure Google will aim you in the right direction.
Cool. Yeah, I encourage anybody watching this to check that out and check any of Paul's other work out. And let's not forget the books, When We Were Bouncers 1 and 2, actually on my bookshelf back there. You can get them on Amazon and most bookstores, right?
Yeah, any bookstore can order it in. That's the great thing about publishing through Amazon, is that I'm hooked up in the same distribution avenues as any other publishing house. So you can have your local bookseller bring it in for you, or a lot of them can arrange discounts, or you can get it straight off Amazon itself. And I'm actually very currently in talks to develop it as a series, either online or on television networks. So I will definitely keep you posted, Stewart, as those things hopefully progress.
I would love to see that for sure. And on social media, where can people find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Mauler MMA, Mauler MMA, and on Instagram at Famous Bouncers.
Excellent. Paul, that's fantastic. Like I said, we could probably talk for hours and hours about all these different facets of your career and how our careers have kind of...
yeah, we got a lot of commonality. That's why we connected in the first place, because even down to like you were Sakuraga's sparring partner, I was Funaki's training partner and adversary. There's just it was weird when I first met you to just keep hearing your path and my path and how many similarities there were.
Yeah. So definitely let's do this again. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show today, and it's also an honor to call you a friend. Thank you very much, Paul, for joining Kraken Chronicles today.
Thank you. It's been an honor.